All right, good morning, everyone. So again, my name is Amanda Sawa. I'm the Restitution Project Coordinator at the State of Hawaii Crime Victim Compensation Commission. Our project is a little bit unique. We look to partner with the SAC in our state, but unfortunately they were unable to work with us on this project, so we were happy to find someone else that could help us with doing some data analysis on restitution in Hawaii. So we partnered with Dr. Joseph Allen. He's a professor at Chaminade University in their Criminology and Criminal Justice Department. And he's worked for our SAC, so he knows the ballpark and he knows the type of work that we're doing. So unfortunately, he couldn't be here with us today, so he prepared some slides showing kind of the results from our data analysis that we wanted to share with you all. So our research goals were to take a closer look at the ordering and collecting of restitution in Hawaii. So yes, we're a compensation program, but in analysis that we did previously, we found that 77% of the restitution cases in Hawaii were tied to property crimes. And our agency, unfortunately, cannot assist victims of property crimes. So while we're meeting the needs of this certain segment of our population, there are a lot of other folks that just can't get any help from CVCC, from our office. So we wanted to take a look and see how are we doing about ordering the restitution and collecting it. And unfortunately, there wasn't any statewide data available. We tried to reach out to the judiciary, but it's not information that was available to us. I'll just leave it at that. So what we did was we looked at our compensation cases as sort of a proxy for statewide victims. So when CVCC pays out compensation, we can request restitution back to our office for the amounts that we've paid out to our victims. So we took a look at just our comp claims, the restitution that was ordered and paid back for that subset. So we looked at two different cohorts, claims that were closed in 2010 and claims that were closed in 2014. So we could kind of do a comparison to see how things have improved or not improved over time. And then after taking a look at that, we wanted to see what are the gaps that remain so that we can reach out to folks and partner with them to make more improvements to ensuring that victims are receiving financial justice through restitution. So our methodology, first we did a compensation case review. So again, we looked at cases from 2010 and 2014. We wanted to take a look and see what types of compensation categories were awarded to the victims, what types of crimes were submitted to us, and then the restitution that was requested as repayment for all of those cases. And then we did a drill down study to look at the actual ordering of restitution by the court and the restitution that was collected from offenders for the cases within those two cohorts. Then we started a system analysis to look at how consistent the courts are being about ordering restitution, what's going on with payments from agency to agency. So we haven't completed as much of the deep data analysis that we wanted to. We kind of didn't realize just how intensive it would be doing the drill down study. As I said, we don't have access to the database that houses all the sentencing records. So we had to use the public court website and look up each case individually to figure out the sentencing data and the restitution data. But it's really important to us. We want to find out this information, and we haven't been successful in other ways. So we dug in our heels and we did it. It took a while, but we do have some of our early analysis, and we're working on looking more deeply at certain things as we prepare a report for our stakeholders. So this is just some background demographics on the victims for the compensation claims that we looked at. So age, I think it was a little less than 20% were minors, and then most of them were adults. Most of our victims were females, 63%. And then we also looked at the county of residence for our victims. So Hawaii is made up of 8 main islands, but only 4 of them are considered our main counties. So most of the victims that we looked at were on the island I live on, which is Oahu, so about 50%. And we were surprised about 30% are coming from Hawaii Island, or the Big Island. So population-wise, they're one of the less densely populated islands, and yet, even though geographically they're very large, they have lots of rural areas, and yet they made up 1/3 of the claims that were coming into our office. So I think that's a reflection of how well our partnership is working with the prosecutor's office and the victim witness programs in that county. So we'd like to see stronger partnerships with perhaps Maui County and Kauai County. So this is some other good information for us to go back and look at how things are working on our comp side as well. So we took a look at our compensation awards by category. So altogether for the two cohorts, 2010 and 2014, we had 1,015 cases that we looked at, and the average award amount was $1,112. So we have different categories for compensation. The first one listed there is acknowledgement award. So we don't have a pain and suffering award, but we do provide what's called an acknowledgement award. It doesn't seek to quantify the victim's pain or suffering, but it acknowledges that they were victimized, and the amount of the award is tied to the severity level of the offense or the crime. Okay, so most of the victims do receive an acknowledgement award. We're not surprised about that. The times where they don't receive an acknowledgement award is if the medical payout reaches our administrative limit. Then we just focus on the medical. So about a third of our victims are receiving compensation for medical expenses, and then the rest of the categories were much smaller. So this wasn't really surprising to us, but it was helpful information to see what we've been able to award, at least in those categories. So then out of the 1,015 compensation claims that we looked at, we wanted to see how well our agency was doing about requesting restitution. And so we found that in 2010, we weren't doing a very good job. We only found, so out of the 511 cases in 2010, only 62 cases showed a restitution request entered in our system. So there are a couple of things going on. I don't think it's true that we only requested restitution in 62 cases. I think what happened was staff were not being diligent about inputting the information. So this is helpful to us in seeing where our deficiencies are with using our data tracking systems and memorializing all of this information. So in 2014, we did better. We did 336 requests, up to 66% of the claims, but that's still not as high as we think it should be. But the other thing to note is that not every compensation claim is tied to a criminal case, because sometimes the victims don't know who their perpetrator was. Sometimes the criminal case ended up not being opened at the courts for whatever reason, so there was nothing that we could request on. So it'll be helpful for us to find out what that number is. What is our 100%? So as we look at our newer claims from, say, 2018, I think we'll be in a better position to measure how well we're doing about requesting restitution now. So of the 1,015 comp cases, we found that 706 of them resulted in a criminal case in the courts. And so Dr. Allen helped us to take a look at the different sentence types. And I wish I could have resorted these slices of the pie, but what it ended up being was that about 20% of the cases ended up resulting in no sentence. So either the cases were dismissed by the courts, or it resulted in a non-conviction, not guilty verdict, or acquittal, and different things like that. And then some of the cases were still pending. But 80% of the cases that we looked at did result in a sentence of either probation, a deferred sentence, or incarceration, either jail or prison. So altogether, there were 558 cases within our data set that resulted in a criminal sentence where they're either on supervision or in custody. So of those 550 cases, we wanted to take a look at how often restitution was being ordered. And what we found was that the courts did better with our 2014 cases. So in 2010, 33% of our claims had restitution ordered back to CVCC. And then in 2014, that increased to 61% of the time restitution was being ordered back. So that was good news. And we do feel that if we look at 2018 cases, that number will be better. That's just kind of the sense that we have from our cases. So we wanted to drill down and see what was going on with the restitution orders by sentence type. And we were actually surprised if you look at incarceration prison. So for folks that were sentenced to, say, an open term of 5 years or more, we often hear this kind of misperception that, oh, if you're sentenced to prison, you can't pay restitution. Why even bother ordering it? They're not going to pay it. Nothing's going to happen. We've been trying to fight that misperception for a long time in our state because we know for a fact that inmates can pay and they do pay restitution. So we were surprised to see that it looks like close to 60% of the prison cases did have restitution ordered, and only 48% of those sentenced to probation had restitution ordered. We thought it perhaps would have been the inverse because folks on probation can still hold a full-time job while they're still living in the community. So we were a little surprised by that, and we wanted to take a look to see what's going on. So we're going to be examining this closer by circuit, perhaps even by judge, to see what the trends are that are affecting these numbers. Yeah. So then we took a look at those 558 restitution cases, who are actually making payments. And so what we found was that in 2010, we had 71 folks, or 85% of that population, actually making payments. And then in 2014, only 66%. And I have to say we're really alarmed when we saw this data, because we figured from 2010 to 2014, requests improved, the number of restitution orders improved, so we thought for sure collections would improve and more people would actually be making payments. We've had a lot more focused attention on restitution in our state since 2012, because that's when we passed justice reinvestment legislation, and part of that included a focus on victim services and restitution. So we're really shocked when we saw these numbers, and we're definitely planning to go back and take a look and see what's impacting that. We've done a lot of study on restitution collections from our inmate and parolee population, and it shows that those numbers went up. And since majority of our cases are probation and deferrals, we think perhaps that's where we need to focus our energy, and that's where we're seeing a decline. So that's kind of our first priority as we proceed, is taking a look to see why less offenders are paying back restitution to their victims. We also wanted to look at kind of the average amount that's being paid and the number of payments. We know that most offenders are not going to be able to pay back 100% of what they owe to their victims. Some of them owe $1 million if it was a white-collar crime or an investment type of case. But we also found that a lot of them can pay it in full, because the average restitution order we found was $1,000 or less, which is very manageable. So we did find in 2010, most offenders on average paid about $746 and made a total of 18 payments over the course of their sentence. And then that went down in 2014, so we were really surprised to see that. So that's something that we'll be examining closer as we finish up our project. So $332 on average and just 8.7 payments. We also wanted to look at the timing of payments, because one thing that we hear from our victims often is how frustrating it is. They're victimized on this day that they will never forget, and then the criminal case has to happen, and then the person is sentenced, and then maybe they start to pay, and by the time that starts, the crime is in this case in 2014, it was 317 days from the date of sentencing to the date of the first payment. That's almost a year. And as you know, from the date of the crime to sentencing can be more than a year or years. And so that's a very long time that our victims are waiting to even get their first restitution payment, which can be very frustrating. So we were encouraged to see that in 2010 it was 564 days, which is really high on average. Then it went down to 317. But of course, we're going to be looking to see what we can do to reduce that even further, because truly, once someone is sentenced and they have a restitution order, they should be making their first payment that very same week or month if possible. Okay. So just to summarize our findings, we found that our restitution requests improved. We're doing a better job as an agency of making sure that we ask the courts for restitution. Restitution orders improved. The courts were doing a better job at making sure it was ordered. And then time from sentencing to first payment also improved. Victims were waiting not as long to get that first payment. But again, we were concerned to see that the amount collected and the number of payments had decreased. So again, our office, we just looked at the compensation claims where we are getting restitution paid back, but we sort of looked at ourselves as a proxy for victims statewide. If this is what we're experiencing as a state agency, then we feel that other victims in general are probably experiencing the same thing. So we want to see what we can do by looking at our gap analysis. How can we improve restitution outcomes for victims statewide? So the analysis that we'll be doing as we finish up the project is looking at, especially on the collection side, what's going on by county, what's going on by enforcement agency. So in our state, restitution is collected either by the court if the offenders are on probation or if they have a deferred sentence, or if they're in prison, then the money is collected by our office at CVCC. So we're going to be taking a look to see what the differences are there. We also wanted to see if the sentence types are having an impact on whether or not restitution is being ordered and collected. So we have more questions now than we did going into the project, and enough to keep us going for a long time with the data that we've collected, but we're excited to continue to take a look at it. We have a meeting scheduled in January with our Justice Reinvestment Restitution Working Group, and that consists of stakeholders from the courts, the prosecutor's office, victim witness, our Attorney General's office, public safety, parole, and our office. And so those representatives get together quarterly in our state, and we're definitely going to be bringing these findings to their attention and discussing as a group what we can do to take next steps to kind of address those gaps that we found. And that's it.